Hey guys, it's CS Joseph of csjoseph.life doing a new episode for season 22. This is cognitive transitions for ESFJs and doing something new. Bicycling right now with Railgun, my lovely bride, and she bought me this bicycle. God bless her. Reminds me of my favorite bike I had when I was a little kid. It's pretty awesome, and it's a cruiser. So I didn't realize I had a cruiser when I was little, but apparently that's what it was. So, but anyway, taking a nice little stroll on the trail here in town. It's pretty nice out, actually. Sun's going down, so I figured, hey, why not try and attempt to shoot a lecture while riding a bicycle? Because, I mean, if I'm going to shoot a lecture while driving, why can't I shoot a lecture while doing a bicycle? Maybe I'll shoot a lecture while jumping out of an airplane one time. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe I'll shoot a lecture while snowboarding. Who knows what else I can do while shooting a lecture. Maybe I'll take up skateboarding to see if I could shoot a lecture while skateboarding. That'll be awesome. Although, let's be frank, I'm really bad at skateboarding. So, but it is what it is. Also, my SE demon eagerly awaits to find out just how many people in this audience are going to be triggered by this video. How many of you people are going to be dizzy? I have no idea. So we'll find out as we get there. But I'm not really going to have my eyes much on the camera for this one because I have to obviously pay attention to what I'm doing. So we'll see how it goes, you know. But hey, at least I have a world-class behind view of my wife as we do this. So I'm pretty excited either way. Here's looking at you, beauty. Anyway, I'm sure she'll find out I said that when she watches the lecture. Anyway, so moving on. Cognitive transitions for ESFJs. So just a little bit of review because these cognitive transition videos have been bringing in a lot of new people to the channel recently. Just want to make sure they don't get left behind. So remember, how do you identify an ESFJ? Look at their interaction style. They're informative, which means they're implicit with their language. Very indirect. They prefer to be indirect because they consider indirectness as which is kind of like a form of passion or a passive aggressive in your speech, beating around the bush. They do this because it's important for them to be respectful, and otherwise they'll just feel too guilty, right? They're initiating, to initiate with people all the time. Hey, what do you want? Or hey, how do you feel? They're constantly doing that all the time. It's like the ESFJ motto, ¿Cómo está usted? Like if they're, speaking Castellano or Espanol. But either way, that's basically their approach. And it's not a bad approach. They're movement oriented, so they're focused on progress and making progress. They don't care about having specific outcomes that they're looking at. They more prefer to just kind of see what happens, go with the flow kind of a thing. It's all about progress or progression. They can be working towards an outcome of some kind, but getting to the outcome, the goal is not as important as the journey. That's movement, right? The journey is everything. So from there, we have Guardian, SJ type. So they're past focused, very duty based. They always do their duty. I mean, if you ask a ESFJ what they want, then you're just gonna get this deer in the headlights response. So, okay, yeah, it's a little weird, but it is what it is. Wow, I got a little bit of a bump here. Let's see how I do. Yeah, cool. Pretty nice. It's kind of nice biking around in town here, doing a lecture, kind of enjoying some nice scenery and cool looking houses that I will not own. So anyway, so yeah, they're guardians and all about safety. What's interesting about ESFJs, professionally speaking, a lot of them are into fire and rescue, actually. Anything that has to do with fire and rescue, ESFJs are all about. And if you're looking for ESFJ men, or even in some, mostly ESFJ men, just looking fire rescue. ESFJs are so traditional that even though you might find a female ESFJ who is a feminist, quite frankly, they're going to stick to traditional gender roles because, they're an SJ, right? And that's what SJs do. they stick to traditional gender roles. So you can kind of understand, like how an ESFJ with FE hero would kind of get a good experience from rescuing somebody, and it's kind of why they're involved with fire and rescue. Let's be straight. So beyond that, ESFJs, temperament-wise, very concrete, down-to-earth people, and have a tendency to complain if they don't like things the way they are, but sometimes they feel too guilty to complain. But their version of complaining, whereas like the ISTJs, it's just straight up direct complaining, but if an ESFJ complains, it's more of an informative, implicit nagging. I mean, if you want to understand who is the most nagging of all the types, and it's an ESFJ, and this includes men, let's be honest. ESFJ men, they're nags. They're all about nags, let's be honest, but not necessarily a bad thing, because being a nag is actually what some types need in relationships, believe it or not. And SFPs, those are the types that need nags in their lives. So, anyone starts complaining about nags or being a nag, well, guess what? SFPs are built for nags, because SFPs forget, and having someone who's nagging them instead of someone who's directly telling them, they don't feel like with their FI hero or their FI parent that they're being violated or uncared for, etc. They actually kind of learn to appreciate the naggingness, because the alternative, which is directly telling them what they have to do because they're being irresponsible, right? They'd rather the more respectful, indirect, passive-aggressive route, because honestly, SFPs can be pretty passive-aggressive themselves. So they kind of like to have that opportunity to understand one or the other, which is appropriate. So, and that's just kind of where that's at. Got a little bit of wind here. I wonder how the wind's gonna hold up for the camera here. Who knows? So, as we change our trajectory here on our bicycles. So anyway, in short, they're extremely supportive people, very duty-based, always there for you, extremely caring. Their virtue and vice is caregiving versus caretaking. Caretaking is their vice. It's giving to get, or anytime they give to you, they keep track of everything that they ever give to you mentally in their head, and then every now and then they'll pull it out of them and be like, hey, I'm doing this for you, so you owe me, so you have to do this for me, basically, which is a form of covert contract, which is a form of manipulation. And whether or not ESFJs realize they do this, they all do it. All ESFJs covert contract. Same thing with the ISFJs. In fact, all Crusader types actually covert contract, which are SFJ, Intp types. They all do it. But the thing is, ESFJs do it the most, the absolute most, and there's not really much that you can do about that per se. It just comes with the territory. Now, obviously, the more mature ones covert contract less, but it still happens. Sometimes covert contracts are actually a good thing, because it's kind of like a defense mechanism that helps them prevent themselves from becoming a doormat, because ESFJs are extremely giving, one of the most giving of all the types. FJ types are the most giving of all the types, I would say. So, and because they're so giving, they have a tendency to potentially give too much and then feel, and and especially SFJs, they can get like insanely bitter. And ESFJs is no different. That bitterness is always there. And that bitterness can come out, especially when they're not being listened to. Being listened to is such a big deal to these people. Although it's kind of funny, because they spend so much time getting everyone else to listen to them, but they don't spend any time listening to others, which means, they're actually inhibiting their own learning. So yeah, think about that. ESFJ, they're like, hey, you need to listen to me because I'm insecure about whether or not I'm a smart person, so you better listen to me, because that tells me that you actually value my thoughts. And if you value my thoughts, that means, that you care about me, right? It's like concrete proof to the ESFJ that you care about them if you listen to them. The problem is that sometimes that could get a little away from them. I mean, that could get way away from them. And they just spend so much time, in some cases, their SE critic, forcing others against their will to listen to them. And the ESFJ ends up getting so used to everyone listening to them with their SI parent, because SI is all about habits and building habits, and they just end up having getting into the habit of everyone else listening to them. This is why it's not always a good thing for an SFJ or an ESFJ, especially in a family, to always know or to always have people that are compatible with them in a family. It's nice to have someone with high camaraderie, because that person is just basically going to not listen to them by default. And it keeps them healthy. It keeps them sharp. It keeps them from getting in this comfort zone, habitual nature where there's like, well, I have the habit of you listening to me all the time, which means we're just going to do what I say and you have no choice to listen to me. Because what happens is that they stop learning. Because then they start to believe with their TE demon that they're actually the smartest person in the room. A lot of people don't understand that, and that has to do with the second gateway for their cognitive transitions, but more on that in a second. So, but, they're concrete, like I said, and very affiliative, always focused on doing the right thing. They consider, family-oriented situations to be like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. And, that's very important for them, honestly. When they're so focused on doing the right thing, they can't, get anything done, because it's like, well, I know what could work, because they're trying to ultimately become pragmatic, because as people grow, they become more like their subconscious, and the subconscious of the ESFJ is an INTP, which is more pragmatic, right? Well, here's the issue, though. Sometimes they're not really willing to sacrifice doing the right thing for the sake of doing what works. If they just do what works, it might actually get them some success in their life. But they're usually not willing to do that, and that can also be a serious problem for them. So yeah, it's just not ideal. I think I'm doing pretty decent with this bike riding, all things considered. Let's cross the street real quick. Move into the next thing. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, but yeah, it's all about, they're so sensitive about being listened to, because that's really how they feed their ego. Their FE hero feels validated when you're listening to them, because then they could feel like the smartest person in the room, and that's all they really want to do. They just want to feel like the smartest person in the room. The problem is it could be at everyone else's expense, and that's kind of the ESFJ way about it, right? So yeah, they're very affiliative, all about doing the right thing. It's kind of why they're so super caring. But then again, both FE heroes are very affiliative. In our last episode in this lecture series, it's like, okay, yeah, ENFJs, they're affiliative too. And ENFJs kind of have the same need of being listened to. The difference is that ESFJs have a huge advantage over ENFJs, because ESFJs have super high long-term memory access with their SI parent. Because they can remember everything in the past. And it's also funny, ESFJs statistically have the longest lifespans of all the types. That's also an interesting standpoint to consider. I have mentioned that before, but just wanted to bring it up again. And they remember everything so well that over time, even an ESFJ can remember when they haven't listened to somebody, and then it's kind of bit them in the butt, right? So that's the thing. And that would be, something of risk, right? For an ESFJ to, keep track of and be worried about. So, anyway. Oh, cute German Shepherd. So, moving on. So, cognitive functions, and they're the FE hero, SI parent, any child, TI inferior, and then FI nemesis, worried about how they feel, etc. But nemesis is also known as the ally, so it could be like the enemy or the villain turn into ally over time as they grow. And then they have the critic function, which is extrovert sensing, and then their trickster is introvert intuition, which is what they want personally for themselves, and then their TE demon. Okay, that's their function stack. And beyond that, they're also really systematic. They follow a system. Gosh, I'm just all over the place in this lecture for some reason, but it's because this is super new and I'm trying to multitask. But I do better work when I multitask like this, actually. It's just NE hero. I have to be doing multiple things at the same time to really get the most insight out. It's just how it works. I can't plan everything. If you guys want me to plan everything, then the quality of everything I do is just going to go down, let's be honest. And that's a fact. You know, a lot of people don't realize that, but it is what it is. I think ESFJs would agree with me, or other Crusader types would agree with me on that. But probably more so INTPs, honestly. So yeah. So cognitive transitions. So why do we care about cognitive transitions? Well, the 4 sides of the mind really matter. And, you know, that's kind of where we're different from everyone else. Everyone thinks that this is just like some MBTI like YouTube channel, but like it's not. I use the MBTI letters because it's good SEO. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I could care less about the MBTI letter dichotomies. I even have a video about how that was debunked. So pay attention to that if you want. But yeah, like, honestly, it's not really that big of a deal. What we talk about here is 4 sides of the mind, 4 sides theory. 4 sides of the mind is that, you know, you have an ego, you have a subconscious, you have a shadow, aka the unconscious, and a superego. Superego is where a person's evil human condition comes from. The ego is like their primary mode of thinking and feeling and decision making. Their subconscious is the kind of person they're trying to aspire to become. And the unconscious is how, you know, someone gains wisdom in their life and become a more to unlock their personal maturity, basically. But personal happiness, because of the person that you're aspiring to become, that's more of your subconscious, right? So you have these 4 sides, but throughout your life, you know, as a child develops, you know, they start off with, you know, certain cognitive functions within their cognitive development. You know, the hero forms first, followed by the inner child, and then the inferior forms after that, and then the parent forms. And the parent function, which is introverted sensing, some people call it the auxiliary function within ESFJs, it is the final function of form in the ego. And honestly, I mean, you're supposed to have that completely formed by the time you're an adolescent, but a lot of people out there end up in what's called cognitive loops. Dave Superpowers talks about cognitive loops a lot in his channel. I learned cognitive loops from my mentor years ago. But cognitive loop, basically, I mean, Dave Superpowers doesn't have this definition, but my definition of cognitive loops is basically when your parent function is underdeveloped, your child and your hero function, because they're optimistic functions and they don't have that healthy pessimism or cynicism from the parent function, what happens is that the FE hero and the NE child basically goes off on a rampage together. So, and this creates an ESFJ who is the ultimate doormat, so that by the time their SI parent function actually develops, they're bitter AF. I mean, if you want to know the most bitter person in the world, you look at an ESFJ who doesn't have their parent function developed. It's because the parent function provides an ESFJ self-discipline. They need that self-discipline. They severely need it. Because if they don't have self-discipline, they're just going to focus on giving everybody what they want with their NE child and making everyone feel good with their FE hero. Feel good. You need to feel good. And I'm going to give you what you want. And you get a car, 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 and everyone gets cars. You see what I'm saying? But then they get like nothing in return, right? Because they're also systematic. ESFJs are focused on the best way of doing things, right? They're really focused on doing things the best way, or finding the best method on how to do it, right? And that's not really the best. If they were interest-based, they could just look at someone and be like, okay, this is what I'm getting out of the situation. This is what you're getting out of the situation. Oh, you're getting more out of it than I am? Well, that means you're automatically manipulating me. Honestly, that needs to be avoided. But, you know, ESFJs, they have to develop the self-discipline within themselves, ultimately, got to turn around here. They have to develop the self-discipline to understand that, hey, whenever I encounter somebody new or old or someone they're familiar with, they always have to, through self-discipline, ask themselves the question, hey, what is this person getting out of this? And versus what am I getting out of it? Is it the same? Am I getting more out of it? Or if they're getting less out of it than the other person, Well, then they realize they're being manipulated. Then they got to use their TI inferior and not be afraid and tell the truth and expose that to the other person. But it's so hard for them to do because they're so informative and they're so systematic. So to develop that sense of personal responsibility within SI parents is actually extremely difficult, right? Like, it's very difficult. So an ESFJ has to trial and error their way through life consistently and make error after error after error, and have people take advantage of them over and over and over them. It's for them to finally get over their SJ normalcy bias for them to change, you know? And that's absolutely necessary. But this all goes beyond that. When you look at that 4 sides of the mind, that's like the big challenge of the ego, but there's other challenges of the other sides of the mind. And I'm not going to get into those challenges because that's more season 19 content. This is season 22. If you want to learn more about season 19, go to csjoseph.life/Patreon. There's a huge menu of all of our content that we offer there. You can check that out there. Now, when it comes to ESFJs specifically, though, try and understand that, you know, they have 4 sides of the mind. Everyone is trying to, you know, develop their subconscious, develop their unconscious, and because of that, people transition. How or why do people transition? There's a lot of different ways for it. So one way, if you look at their transition to subconscious, that's based on fear. It's all about fear, right? Or it's about aspiration. There's a positive or negative transition. So remember, you can enter into one of your sides of your mind either chaotically or orderly. You can enter your side of the mind, any side of the mind, with the power of the yin, like, you know, yin and yang, right? Or the power of the yang. The yang is about the firm, the orderly, whereas the yin is all about chaos. Kind of like a bottle of water going ka-chunk, 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 versus a nice constant stream of water coming out of that bottle because there's enough air inside of it. It's coming out in an orderly manner, right? So it's not, the air and the water is not competing for 3-dimensional space within the bottle, right? It's the same concept with cognitive transition. The absolute same concept. So anyway, so you have 4 gateways. How do you mechanically transition? Well, you transition in the ego with your hero function, but that's basically default because that's what's given to you as a child, right? Then you transfer into your subconscious with the 2nd gateway, which is your inferior function, which is TI inferior, or logic, or thinking, one's own thinking. That's for an ESFJ, right? So then beyond that, you have the 3rd gateway, which is introverted feeling nemesis, right? And then you have the 4th gateway, which is their extroverted thinking demon, to get into their superego. And obviously, there's different ways of going it, but each transition has an orderly transition versus a chaotic transition. You know, it is what it is. It's just how it works. So what causes the transitions? Well, honestly, stress, fear, worry, also someone being disrespected. Those are the negative causes, and that can cause like a chaotic transition. And then there's positive things, which could be a self-actualization for your ego, which would be like receiving recognition, ESFJ, because they love them some recognition. The FE hero loves it when other people venerate them for their good contributions, for being so supportive, right? That's really important. That's super important. But these are the different kinds of transitions that they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Because honestly, you know, unlike what other people would teach, maybe with the MBTI, it's like, hey, you can only be this one type. There is no such thing as the 4 sides of the mind. That's just all it is, right? You're this type, and that's all you get, you know? Well, that's not true, because our brains, the way it works is there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution. There's just no such thing. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. One brain cannot solve every problem that a human being can encounter. One persona or personality cannot solve it all. So the mind has secondary and tertiary processes to shift its cognition in such a way to be able to solve various problems. That's what it does naturally. But it can also, it's not just used for solving problems, it's also used for personal growth, right? Again, more on that in season 19 for ESFJs. That lecture is already done. The first 9 episodes of season 19 are done. I still have 8 more to go. So, with that being said, ESFJs, have to transition, into their subconscious, right? Well, they're already transitioning to their ego because they're just kind of given that one for free by default. Congratulations, you were born, right? You won the great cosmic lottery. You know what I mean? So that cosmic lottery, that's pretty important. People got to know how that works, right? Well, anyway, gotta turn around here because there's too much noise over there. I don't want you guys to be able to hear me. So I'm not exactly wearing a microphone right now. So, also, welcome to California. This is how it is down here. So, anyway. So, how would an ESFJ go about being happier? Well, they have to transition and learn how to transition in subconscious. But then again, their fear can also get them there as well. So let's look at that. Let's look at the first, the second transition technically. So we already talked plenty about the ego in this lecture so far. So the subconscious, which is INTP subconscious. INTP, they're brilliant. INTPs are brilliant. They're probably the most brilliant, or the second most brilliant of all the types. I personally maintain the INFP is actually the most brilliant of all the types, especially with how they can absorb information rapidly and create a pattern and a system around it, and then essentially regurgitate that information with like this internal philosopher's stone / Library of Alexandria that's like an I win button for everybody. And I think that's pretty awesome. INTP, they can create solutions. They can engineer any solution. And being able to do that requires some insane brain power. And let's be honest, there's some ESFJs out there that are brilliant physicists. There's some ESFJs out there that are brilliant engineers. They're probably the ESFJs that grew up, being picked last and not able to be chosen or fit enough to be in the military or in fire and rescue and the like. So they decided to devote their lives to science, especially since they're so insecure about people listening to them. And they figure, well, if people are going to value hearing me and hearing my voice, because that's what my sister does. She's an ESFJ. She's always talking about how her ISFP husband gives her a voice all the time, and how that's so important to her, that her voice is so important to her, because it's just concrete proof that her ISFP husband is going to listen to her. Of course he would. He's got TE inferior. TE inferior listens to everybody intently. It's just, it itself is not always going to express their opinion, but then again, the ESFJ is constantly asking the ISFJ, hey, how do you feel about this, or what's your opinion? And then the ESFJ can get that additional input and make better decisions. That's when an ESFJ is healthy, when they're willing to actually listen to others. But sometimes they get so afraid that no one's listening to them that they stop listening to others entirely. And in fact, they can get so bitter with their introverted sensing because no one has listened to them before. Everyone around them feels that they're stupid and treats them like they're stupid, that they just automatically assume that everyone around them is not going to listen to them. So what they do is they use their SJ affiliative forcefulness and force other people to listen to them, even if they're wrong. And they don't care they're wrong. They're just going to stick their boot on someone's neck and force that person to listen to them. And then they may not even give that person the opportunity to provide feedback to what they've just said, which is also another issue. And that's when you get a hyper insecure, TI inferior ESFJ, because they're just really afraid of not being listened to. And then they use their SE critic, their shadow, to force other people to listen to them. And they're just afraid. And, you can actually really force that out of an ESFJ by telling the ESFJ to their face that they're stupid. You literally treat them like they're stupid. And that's not appropriate. Cute dog. So be aware of that. We can't just, you got to be careful around ESFJs. You have to always listen to them, even if you think they're wrong. But you could tell a healthy ESFJ from an unhealthy one, because when they're telling you what they think, if they're not going to spend any time listening to you and they would just prefer to be in their comfort zone and keep their head in the sand, that's a problem. And it's really frustrating when these people are like, you better listen to me. You don't value me unless you listen to me. Well, that can also be another issue entirely. And that's not something anyone wants, not at all. But it's not that they know that. But then again, that's one of the fastest ways for an ESFJ to feel unwanted anyway, is they just constantly sharing what they think with everybody and expecting everyone to listen because they're so afraid of feeling that they are stupid, right? Now, a healthy transition, an orderly transition looks a little bit different. It's more like, okay, yeah, they are the ESFJ who has an open mind. And that's how they use their INTP side. Because if they don't have an open mind, wow, I just swallowed a bug. That's really fantastic. Amazing. So an ESFJ, when, it's kind of like, how I would just randomly spit on my own deck while filming, right? And I probably grossed out all the ESFJs when I did that, right? If you guys remember from season 1. Or was it season 2 that I did that? I don't remember. Not relevant to this lecture. Anyway. So, glad I didn't choke on that bug. I'm really glad I didn't choke on it. Could have. So anyway, I might start coughing. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. So ESFJs, when they're healthy, they have an open mind. Where that INTP is not like forcing other people to listen to, I'm smarter than you. And they actually have an open mind and they're listening to other people. That's super important, having that open mind. Because the SI parent is in there, and if it's not really well developed, it's only going to accept input from known sources. Or sources that they're familiar with. Any unfamiliar ideas, they're not going to care about. But INTP subconscious is all about the unfamiliar. The better, more happier, more developed, more mature ESFJ is open to new ideas. They don't have their head in the sand, which is what I accuse them of consistently. I accuse them all the time of having their head in the sand. And that could be a problem. So, try not to do that, ESFJs. Don't have your head in the sand. You have to have an open mind. You will never be happy unless you're an open mind. If you're always focused on what's familiar, well, guess what? Familiarity breeds contempt. And if you're allowing yourself to breed contempt in your own mind, you're going to hold other people in contempt. And then guess what? They're going to mirror you, especially if they're SPs, and hold you in contempt because you're not willing to experience the unfamiliar. Because it's all about your safety, all about your comfort zone. At the same time, you have to embrace new ideas. You have to embrace unfamiliar ideas. Unfamiliarity is the secret. Unfamiliar ideas are the secret to ESFJ success as a person, especially getting those healthy cognitive transitions, developing that INTP subconscious, which literally leads to ESFJ brilliance. But how can it go wrong? Let's give you an actual example of somebody I know. Enter the INTP known as Dave. Dave is a great dude. He's an INTP. He worked for the hospital conglomerate I used to work for. Fantastic fellow. An amazing VMware developer. He worked in security, although for some reason he was not doing security because when they hired him for security, but he couldn't do security because they didn't have anyone to handle infrastructure. So he ended up getting stuck doing all the infrastructure work, even though that wasn't his job description. All the while that happened, he was married to an ESFJ. And okay, you can already see where this is going, right? Because INTP ESFJ relationships are like the worst. So they got together and they got married. He was in the military at the time. Got out of the military, went into engineering, did fantastic. But let me tell you something about this ESFJ wife of his. She thought she was so brilliant. She thought she was the smartest person in the world. She'd take her little affiliative master's degree and be like, I'm so smart because I completed this and, I'm literally better than everybody else. And it's like, I'm smarter than everybody else. I don't have to listen to you. You don't have a master's degree. I don't have to listen to you. And I'm like, wow, really? Your credentials mean nothing. I was so tempted so many times to just tell her that she was stupid to her face, because I'm like, wow, what value do you actually have? You're so closed-minded. You're literally one of those people who goes to school, goes to college, gets a job, and then you stop growing because you think you've made it. You got your master's degree. You don't have to learn anymore. Wow. You're not willing to accept unfamiliar ideas. Wow. Okay, thank you for having your head in the sand. That's really appropriate. You know what I'm saying? So that's a problem, right? That's a serious problem. You know, we can't allow ourselves to be, we can't allow our ESFJs to be that ignorant. And let's be honest, TI and Fury can be really ignorant, it can be really ignorant. ESFJs, they can be like walking ignorance boosters, making other people ignorant around them because they start enforcing ignorance because of those unfamiliar ideas that threatens their personal safety or threatens their familiarity or threatens their comfort zone, right? This could be a serious problem for them. And they're just really not really aware of it. It's like really frustrating, right? So yeah, like what do you do in that situation? Well, to go on, their relationship didn't go very well, and he kept on trying to bring new ideas to her. It threatened her familiarity. She felt unsafe. And then she just went SE rage with her ISFP shadow, and then physical confrontation. I remember taking photos of him that had bruises. And it's like, wow, Mr. INTP, you got such more normalcy bias that you don't even realize that it's not okay for your wife to beat you or your children. Maybe you should divorce her. Thank God, through an intervention of all of his friends, he got to the point where he did divorce her, and he's better off for it. God bless him, he figured it out. But that's just how far the normalcy bias and the familiarity complex can go within Crusader types, ESFJs and INTPs. That doormat effect. And the thing that he was accusing her, he was kind of guilty of himself because he wasn't willing to let go. But I'm glad he figured it out. Anyway, the divorce, I imagine, opened her up and forced her to be in a situation where she'd have to accept new ideas. Or, because of how bitter she is in her life, maybe she ended up having to further, go into her turtle shell, and then as a result of being in her turtle shell, not actually succumb to new ideas or unfamiliar ideas. And stuck on that unfamiliarity and let that contempt breed within her, that bitterness breed within her forever. Are you kidding me? That's horrible. But that's the life these ESFJs, these ignorant, head in the sand ESFJs live. They're so bitter and they don't even know it. And the best thing that could happen to them is someone coming up to them and telling them to their face, you're ignorant, you're being stupid because you will not embrace new ideas. And you think you got everything figured out, but you don't. So what you have to do at that point to an ESFJ who's that way, well, you have to abandon them. You have to make them feel unwanted. You have to make sure that they know that no one values their thinking. No one is going to listen to them and no one wants them. And only then will they consider that maybe their thinking needs to change if they're that bad. If they're good, it's not really a problem because then they're telling you about all these new ideas that they're having, and they actually go experiment and they become like this amazing, brilliant scientist, which is pretty awesome. There's some really cool ESFJ astrophysicists that work for NASA, for example. They're just amazing, fantastic people, and the mathematics that they do. INTP focused ESFJs, folks, they are amazing. I absolutely love hanging out with them and just listening to that TI aspirational ideas. It's really unbelievable. I think it's fantastic. So beyond that, let's look in the shadow. So the third cognitive transition, the nemesis transition, this is where an ESFJ worries about their self-worth. They worry about how worthy they are. So already they're afraid of being stupid. They're afraid that they don't know enough. They're afraid that their intelligence may be lacking, or they're afraid that they can't contribute enough to a conversation intelligently. So they end up just staying silent and in the background in a conversation until they're comfortable enough to know that they can actually contribute, right? Well, that can be a problem too. But beyond that, they're already worried about their self-worth. They don't know whether or not they're doing a good job. And a good job is something that they need to consider. Doing a good job is important. So they need recognition, folks. But sometimes they're not going to get that recognition. And that could be a serious problem for some ESFJs out there. It's a little bumpy right now, so going down a hill, trying to go a little safe because I haven't been down it before. SI inferior, you know what I'm saying? And I got it the rest of the way. Cool. So, awesome. And there's still plenty of light. I really like this iPhone camera. It's pretty nice. It's got light amplification. I think it's awesome. So, anyway. So, yeah, they're worried about their self-worth. And that could be a serious problem for them. Because it causes them to care more and care more and care more, but at the risk of being a doormat. And honestly, people, stop doormatting ESFJs. I am guilty of doormatting ESFJs. I doormatted my sister, I'll admit it. I did that as a little kid. I shouldn't have. I also doormatted my ESFJ grandmother. Really bad idea. I remember the last time I actually did it. My mom caught me, and she laid down the smackdown for that one. I regret it. I didn't even realize just how manipulative I was being and taking advantage of my ESFJ grandmother. I did as a little kid. I didn't even realize it. And then all of a sudden, I came to the realization, and my effing child just felt so guilty. I was so insanely guilty as a result of that situation. I never treated my grandmother the same ever again. And whenever I visit her, I always go out of my way to spend the time listening to her, even if, I'm not even interested in what she's saying, or even if I don't agree with her thinking. But sometimes I like to have some verbal, intellectual sparring with her. It makes her feel valued when I challenge some of her ideas, but not too much. And see her, embrace unfamiliar ideas. Because otherwise she's going to get all of her ideas from CNN, because that's what I've noticed that she does. Especially with those people in her circle of friends within her age group. They seem to all be glued to the television and talking about current events all the time. And a lot of them are SJs because they have long lifespans. And they all are, talking about that familiar media, right? So they end up becoming this big regurgitating echo chamber, and unfamiliar ideas are just not really something my grandmother's exposed to. So her growth is being stunted as a result of this echo chamber. So I try to go out of my way to bring her out of that echo chamber sometimes and bring unfamiliar ideas to her consistently whenever possible when I see her. Although she's been having some stroke-related problems, which haven't been that great, and she had some medication problem recently. They put her in the hospital, so I am concerned that she won't be with us for very much longer. But she's knocking on 90 years old at this point. So, and but she's a fighter. She's still in there. Also, she's former Central Intelligence, so she's pretty tough. Let's be honest. But honestly, it's just she doesn't always have the opportunity to have those new ideas or those new experiences or those new people, and that's one of the things I get really concerned about. But one of the things, though, is that she worries about her self-worth, and this causes my grandmother, as a member of our family, to go above and beyond consistently. And it's funny, watching her FE hero combat the FE hero of my father, because she lives with my mom and dad. And my dad's an ENFJ and she's an ESFJ, and they let's be honest, they got some camaraderie there going, and honestly it's healthy for the both of them because it keeps them both sharp, but they can get at each other's throats. And when my dad, let's be honest, when he gets super upset at my grandmother, just to get back at my grandmother, what he does is he just does the dishes, because she typically does the dishes. So he takes away opportunities from her to contribute to the family, and it makes her feel guilty. It makes her feel worthless, basically. And that's how he gets back at her. It's kind of interesting to watch, honestly. But yeah, if you want to get back at an ESFJ, that's what you do. You just be like, hey, I'm going to start doing your things, your responsibilities around the house, and take away your opportunity to contribute. That way, you already worry about your self-worth, and then you're going to worry about it even more. And then that forces my grandmother deep into her shadow, sometimes, according to my, dad's point of view, he's pretty justified because of what my grandmother does, because, enforcing ignorance, which is what ESFJs can do sometimes. He's just not having it. He's an intuitive. He's abstract. She's trying to keep him in concrete land and not letting him have the freedom of choice in abstract land, because that's what SE Critic can do. SE Critic can get in the way of other people, of abstract people, and force people to be in the concrete against their will. And that doesn't really bode well for them. And this especially happens when it comes to, their ISFP shadow, because it's like, oh, I'm worried about my self-worth. I'm worried that I'm contributing enough. I'm worried that I'm a good person, and when they don't really have, much proof as to whether or not they are a good person. But it's weird because it gets especially bad with ENFJs because they forget. At least ESFJs have the opportunity to remember all of their previous contributions. But if they don't get enough recognition, they use those past contributions as weapons against people. And this is where the covert contracting comes from. They'll start covert contracting people and being like, hey, I've scratched your back all this time. You better scratch mine. I've wiped your butt so many times. You better wipe mine. Kind of situation. And I guess, in an elderly situation, okay, it's probably inappropriate, but you see where I'm going with this? Like, ESFJs, they really want to have an opportunity to feel special. That's what FI Nemesis is all about, feeling special. And they have concrete proof of being special themselves when people give them recognition, when people show them gratitude and thanks, and it helps them get over their worry. And then they're no longer worried because they are surrounded by people and by reminders all the time who do nice things for them because they're showing gratitude. ESFJs need gratitude. And when they're getting enough gratitude, they're no longer worried about their self-worth. So instead, they're really wise. They become very wise. They become extremely mature. And they are no longer worried about their self-worth. They're actually properly valuing themselves. And they know that, hey, I have all the concrete proof in the world that I'm a good person because I have all these people showing me gratitude. Okay, I don't have to worry about that anymore. So then they have a healthier transition into their shadow, which allows them to be ultimately more artistic. They can put on a better show. They can contribute in more meaningful ways. I don't know, even even the simple things of life, making sure everything is in a clean, safe environment for everyone, watching over children, saving people. Like, their physical capability goes through the roof if they know people are grateful for their contributions. If people are ungrateful around them, well, then they're going to be constantly worried that they're a bad person, and then as a result, their growth is stunted. And they're not going to be able to, wisely handle the environment. You see ESFJs who are like hoarders, or you see ESFJs who are, who don't take care of themselves. It's because there's not really anyone who's grateful for them. And expressing gratitude is so critical to an ESFJ health. They absolutely need that gratitude. So for, their personal growth, they have to remind people sometimes, hey, be grateful. This is why they covert contract. But here's the thing. They just have to be overt and contract overtly, not covertly, because covert is, that is the manipulative way. But when they give things to people, they can caregive at first. Yeah, I'm caregiving for you. I'm giving to you. I'm contributing to you. But then they're like, hey, in order for me to keep contributing to you, I'd really like you to do this thing for me, And that way it's overt. That way it's communicated. That way it's understood, right? And then the ESFJ doesn't have to worry about it anymore. The ESFJ understands their own value, and because they know that they're getting something in return, which is really important. But sometimes, if you think about it, they feel really bad that they even have to ask, because let me be honest, Crusader pride is all over the place. Crusaders get super prideful because they're like, well, if I'm complaining, I must not be doing a good job anyway. It's like, okay, yeah, fair enough. But sometimes, as my mother-in-law would say, closed mouths don't get fed. ESFJs honestly have to be okay with complaining. And sometimes, not being so indirect about it, but actually being direct about it. That way they actually get something done, Because sometimes people aren't listening, or they just don't know how to listen. And that TI and fear can't be steamrolling people like it always does. They have to keep that in check through self-discipline with their parent. That's why ESFJs need self-discipline so much. It's absolutely critical to their self-worth, to their personal growth, all of it. So with that being said, ISFP unconscious can be very powerful. They take care of themselves. They create an orderly, safe environment. They become very skilled at making food, handling the house, cleaning the house, keeping all their obligations, making sure other people around them are meeting their obligations, managing the family, rescuing people that need to be rescued. All of a sudden, that ESFJ cares more. If you want an ESFJ to start caring less, well, guess what? Don't show them any gratitude. Because if there's ungrateful people, then why should they care? That's like the INTP version of that is, hey, if I'm going to do the time, I may as well do the crime. Whereas the ESFJ version is, why should I care if no one else cares, right? So you have to be grateful to them. It helps them transition in their shadow. And their shadow will actually take care of you because the home, the family, the traditions, the new ideas, everything that they do, even engineering from their INTP side, it becomes a piece of art, and they can make it an artful experience for everyone. And then it's no longer about their experience, it's about everyone's experience, if they're not worried about their self-worth. And they'll stop covert contracting. They will make their expectations known because then they are able to meet their own needs. We talk about, in season 6 playlist on this YouTube channel, hey, by the way, you have to take responsibility for meeting your own needs. This is how ESFJs do it. They just need gratitude. Now, an ESFJ has to recognize you're not always going to have grateful people around. If people are being ungrateful to you, ESFJs, stop being loyal to them. Stop being obligated to them. Abandon those people. It's okay. ESFJs, you have every right to abandon people who are ungrateful for the things that you do. You are a caregiver. If you're giving care to someone and they're ungrateful, stop giving to them. It's not that hard. And move on. And then stop feeling guilty about it. If you keep feeling guilty, you're going to keep worrying about your self-worth because then you're going to start believing that that person is actually better than you and that, well, maybe I'm not doing a good enough job. Maybe I'm not caregiving enough. And then you give even more, which will add to even more bitterness. And then it's just going to be horrible for you. Like, why would you do this to yourself? You can't. You have to know when to let go. ESFJs, you need to read the book When Codependent No More or When Helping Hurts, those kinds of things, because you can be an enabler. I've watched my ESFJ grandmother enable my ENFP uncle. My ENFP uncle, who often does not deserve the kindness that she gives him. And he strings her along, almost coquettish-like, with gratitude. He'll give her a little bit of gratitude here and there just to keep her going. And then sometimes, he can be pretty depraved and selfish, and she just buys into it because every now and then he'll leave her with some gratitude because she's not getting enough gratitude from other sources, right? Which is typical of ESFJs everywhere. So, so I go out of my way. I try to show gratitude when I'm around her. But the thing is also, like, even at her age, she needs to be around people who show her gratitude, but she also needs to be put in situations where she has the opportunity to contribute and then being given gratitude for those contributions that she does. They're all about opportunities. An ISFP or unconscious, they're going to end up wanting the wrong thing because of anti-trickster. You don't want to get them in a situation where they want to contribute to the wrong person, because ESFJs can develop Stockholm Syndrome in as much as an ENTP could, because they could just become loyal to the wrong people. So you have to step in and you have to criticize them. You have to tell them, hey, I don't believe it's a good thing for you to be supporting this person. I don't think it's a good thing for you to be caregiving this person. They're not going to give you gratitude. They're not going to give you what you're hoping for. Why are you putting your faith in this person? They have a track record of never actually giving back. They never are grateful. There's no concrete evidence of gratitude. And then they're like, you know what? You're right. Why do I even bother? And then they stop. And then they can become loyal to somebody else. They always just got to be loyal to something. It's one of the reasons why ESFJs are in churches a lot, because it's a system and they're systematic and they can be loyal to it. The problem is that if the church or the religious belief system becomes corrupt, or the leaders become corrupt, they will go corrupt with it, and then they will enforce the ignorant ideas of that system, and much to the detriment of people in their lives and their family. You know, which I completely understand. I do understand it, but it's definitely not something I could really get behind. So yeah, that's that transition. And the final transition is the demon transition with the superego, which basically is, it comes out negatively when they're not being listened to, like I talked about. When they're not being listened to that way, but for them, it's that they're going to force other people to listen. They will take charge. It's like, hey, if you're not being grateful to me, if you're not listening to me, well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to destroy your reputation. And if you want to know an ESFJ, they will destroy your reputation. Absolutely. Everyone will know how ungrateful a person, how selfish of a person, how depraved a person you really are. And you know where the adage comes from, you'll never work in this town again. Well, that's because of ESFJs. You'll never work in that town again because of them. Because their TE demon will literally burn all of the bridges in your life. They will burn all your bridges down. Quote, I'm going to destroy your life before you do. Right? Because that's how it works. Because you either didn't listen or you were ungrateful, and that's what happens. So that can be a problem. That's kind of a very negative way of doing it. However, if you're making sure that you're listening to them, if you're showing gratitude, if you're handling all those things, they end up actually increasing everyone's reputation, everyone's status around them for their own, for those people's benefit, not necessarily their own, which is the angelic form. But more on that in season 19. So anyway, folks, I think this completes the cognitive transitions for ESFJs. I know I was a little chaotic, a little scattered around, but I was trying to pay attention to what I'm doing here on this bicycle. I'm really enjoying this ride, and I think I kind of got the hang of it now, and I figured out how to get into a flow state, so to be able to lecture like this. So it's my first time doing this, so we'll figure out how to do that, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to lecture like this and exercise at the same time. So anyway, if you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Also check us out at our podcast, csjoseph.life/podcast. If you'd like to financially contribute to what we're doing and get a whole bunch of awesome premium content for it, including our question and answer, private lectures, conferences for cutting edge material that's just not out yet, that is basically available at csjoseph.life/Patreon. If you want to get into figuring out how to sell to people, how to market to people, go to ultimatemessagingformula.com as well. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for being such an amazing audience. I love the comments, guys. Keep them coming. Please comment, I read every single comment. So, and it's kind of interesting that it's pitch black, and thank you for putting up with this kind of a slow lecture, but hey, just trying something new here and trying to get it figured out. So I'm very grateful for all of your patience. So anyway, with that being said, folks, you all have a good night as I enter the continued pitch blackness here. So later.